Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. IRS, some people get more time to file without asking. Anyone else can request an automatic extension. IR 2021-96, April 29, 2021, Washington. Anyone can request an automatic tax filing extension, but some people get extra time without asking, according to the Internal Revenue Service. So note the filing deadline had been extended from April 15th to May 17, 2021. If you still cannot file by that point in time, May 17, 2021, then you want to file an extension and get the extension, and the extended time period is back to kind of like the normal, meaning the end date is kind of like the normal end date, which is October 15th, 2021. Remember that if you are filing an extension, you want to keep the idea of the extension and penalties and interest that you are avoiding from filing the extension separate from the payment requirements. In other words, if you owe a payment as of May 17th, then you want to make the payment so that you can avoid penalties and interest on the payment, and then file the extension so that you avoid penalties and interest on filing the extension. If you owe them money, in other words, the IRS still expects to get paid at that point in time. However, if they owe you money, if you expect a refund, but you still need an extension to file, then you file the extension, and the IRS is pretty much okay, of course, that they owe you money because you're basically giving them a loan, and they're generally happy not to pay you until a later point in time. So it's really the issue when you owe them money. Also note, you might ask, well, how do I know how much I owe them until I file the tax return? And I can't file the tax return because I don't have the records to file the tax return, and that's why I'm going on extension in the first place. Well, in that case, you can then do an estimate, of course, put the information into the tax software as best you can, get the estimate, determine how much you might owe them if you owe them as of the deadline of May 17th, and then pay them an estimated tax payment and file an extension. If you don't know at all, then again, you have to make some type of estimate if you expect to owe them, because if you don't and you owe them money, then again, you might be subject to some penalties and interest on it. That's going to be the general idea. So just keep those two things separate. But apparently some groups, and we'll see those groups shortly, will have an extension automatically. So due to the ongoing pandemic this year, the IRS postponed the usual April 15th deadline for filing individual income tax returns until May 17th, 2021. May 17th, 2021. May 17th, 2021. So even so, as is the case every year, many Americans will still need more time to meet their tax filing obligations. The IRS estimates that more than 16 million taxpayers will get an automatic extension this filing season, either by filing a form or making an electronic tax payment. But some taxpayers, including disaster victims, those serving in a combat zone, and Americans living abroad, get more time even if they don't ask for it. Here are details on each of these special tax relief provisions. So here's the kind of the exceptions, and then we'll go into the general rule for everybody else after these exception cases. So the disaster victims of the February winter storms in Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana have until June 15, 2021 to file their 2020 returns and pay any tax due. The IRS automatically provides filing and penalty relief to any taxpayer with an IRS address of record located in a federally declared disaster area when at least one area qualifies for FEMA's Individual Assistance Program. Ordinarily, this means that taxpayers need not contact the IRS to get disaster tax relief. That's because they have the information in their system, so that they should get that automatically. This relief also includes more time for making the 2020 contributions to IRAs and other plans, and making the 2021 estimated tax payments. So that is nice. That may not be applicable to other kind of areas, including the normal filing of the extension, meaning the ability to still put money, for example, into an IRA, often the last minute kind of tax planning thing, because it's often useful to be able to do the tax return before you know how much and whether you can put money into an IRA, individual retirement account. So in some cases, relief is also available to people living outside the disaster area if, for example, they have a business located in the disaster area, have tax records located in the disaster area, or are assisting in disaster relief. For details on all available relief, visit the Around the Nation page on the IRS.gov. The Around the Nation page is, there's a link to that here. I like saying that. Around the Nation page. There's a link to that here. So combat zone taxpayers. So here's the next exception for the combat zone. So we have the military service members and eligible support personnel serving in a combat zone have at least 180 days after they leave the combat zone to file their tax returns and pay any tax due. So the government, once again, is gracious enough, if you happen to be in a combat zone, to extend the filing deadline. If you're working in a combat zone, we appreciate your service there. This includes those serving in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other combat zones. A complete list of designated combat zone locations can be found in Publication 3, Armed Forces Tax Guide. There's a link to that here. It's also available on the IRS.gov website. Combat zone extensions also give affected taxpayers more time for a variety of other tax-related actions, including contributing to an IRA. So once again, they have that extension on the IRA, which is nice because, like I say, it's nice to be able to do the tax return and kind of make that your last-minute type of tax planning thing. And what you want to do when you do your tax returns, it would be nice if you had the money. Obviously, you can only take advantage of an IRA or putting money into an IRA if you got cash, typically, to do it. So when you do the tax returns, it would be nice if you can kind of anticipate whether or not you may have the ability to put in money into an IRA and have that money available, because it could be something that could be significant and could lower the taxes. So various circumstances affect the exact length of the extension available to taxpayers. Details, including examples illustrating how these extensions are calculated, are in the extensions and deadlines sections in Publication 3. Taxpayers outside the United States. U.S. citizens and resident aliens who live and work outside the U.S. and Puerto Rico have until June 15, 2021 to file their 2020 tax returns and pay any tax due. The special June 15th deadline also applies to members of the military on duty outside the U.S. and Puerto Rico who do not qualify for the longer combat zone extension. Affected taxpayers should attach a statement to their tax return explaining which of these situations apply. So if you have the two that apply, the combat zone or this extension, then you want to tell the IRS, which one applies, because you don't want to confuse them over there. You know what happens when you confuse them? Things get delayed and stalled, and it's just a problem. So, you want to tell them what's going on there. So though taxpayers abroad get more time to pay, interest, currently at the rate of 3% per year compounded daily, applies to any payment received after this year's May 17th deadline. So they still want the payment May 17th, or else you got the 3% interest on that. So for more information about the special tax rules for the U.S. taxpayers abroad, see Publication 54, Tax Guide for U.S. Citizens and Resident Aliens Abroad on IRS.gov. There's also a link to that Publication 54 here. Anyone else? Last bucket that the rest of us all fall into, the everyone else side here. Taxpayers who don't qualify for any of these three special situations can still get more time to file by submitting a request for an extension. So that's kind of like the normal process here. Only thing different now is that they extended the normal filing deadline from April 15th to May 17th. So we have a little bit more time to either file the return or file the extension. Then the extension goes to the normal ending date, which is that October 15th. So this will extend their filing deadline until October 15, 2021, but because this is only a tax filing extension, their 2020 tax payments are still due May 17th. So keep those two things separate. Once again, there's two things that you need to do to avoid penalties and interest. One, we have the filing deadline, and then that they can charge penalties and interest if you do not do that by either filing a tax return or extension. And then two, payment deadline. So the payment deadlines, they want their money during the year, but anything that's going to be due by May 17th, they want by the filing of May 17th, whether you file an extension or not generally. Now, if they owe you money, that meaning you're going to get a refund, then it's easy. You just file the extension and basically, and they're fine with not paying you until later. But if you owe them money, then you want to file the extension to avoid the penalties on the extension and make the payment if you can, so that you avoid the penalties and interest on the late payment. Those are two separate things you want to keep basically in your mind. So, and an easy way to get the extra time is through Free File on IRS.gov. So there's that Free File software, and if your income is below a certain threshold, you can use that to file. That's the links to other third-party softwares, and if your income's below a certain level, then you get free access to the software. Now, if all you're doing is filing an extension, then you may not even do the full tax return to file it, and you would think that your income would be below the threshold in that case. So that would mean that you would think you could do that for free with the Free File kind of option. So that's one option you can do to file the extension. In a matter of minutes, anyone regardless of income can use this free service to electronically request an extension on Form 4868. And they're saying anyone can do it. So maybe even if you have a income level above the threshold, you can enter the information into the tax software and still file the extension, which would be good, because if you owe money, then you can give the extended amount that you owe. Now, then if your income is above the threshold, however, for it to be free, then maybe they let you file the extension, but they won't let you actually file the tax return without paying them. But if your income is below a certain threshold, then you should have the free software, and you would think the extension would be free as well in that case. So to get the extension, taxpayers must estimate their tax liability on this form. So note that is a problem oftentimes, because you might be saying, well, I know I'm going to owe taxes, but I don't know how much I owe because I can't fill out the taxes, and I can't fill out the taxes because I don't have the bookkeeping or whatnot in order to do that. So how can I pay them until I know how much I need to pay them? Well, in that case, you still have to estimate it. You got to estimate, because if you don't, then the IRS will still charge you on it. They'll charge you penalties and interest. So if you owe them money and you don't know how much you owe them, you can fill out the tax return using the Free File form as best you can, give an estimate for it, and then give them the payment that you think would be the proper payment, and then reconcile when you actually file the tax return by October 15th, and reconcile at that point in time. That would be the general idea. Another option is to pay electronically and get a tax filing extension. The IRS will automatically process an extension when a taxpayer selects Form 4868 and makes a full or partial federal tax payment by the May 17th due date using Direct Pay, the Electronic Federal Tax Payment System, otherwise known as the Eftps, or a debit or credit card. So if you use these electronic payments, typically when you do an electronic payment, you have to assign that to some tax year or some form. Usually it's going to be to like 2020 estimated tax payments, for example, or 2021 estimated tax payments, or in this case, you would assign it to then Form 4868, the extension, so that the IRS knows where to put the money towards. Otherwise, they'll get confused again, and then that's all problems happen. So if you do that, if you owe them money, one option you can do it if you know how much you owe them, which again, you might not know until you did the tax return or at least made an estimate of it. But if you know how much you owe them, then you can make the payment, assign it to the proper Form 4868, and then you should be okay there. And that'd be like filing an extension, because you told them you have an extension by telling them you have a payment applying to it, and you told them how much you think you owe them by actually paying them the amount that you think that you owe them. So in other words, if they owe you money, then you're not going to make a payment to them, but you need to still file an extension, which you could do simply using Form 4868 or by using tax software to file the extension. No problem with the payment, because they owe you money and they're okay, paying you at a later point in time. You just want to avoid penalties and interest on the filing requirement. If you owe them money, you could do that by using the free software to calculate how much you owe them, or at least estimate it, and then file the extension and make the payment to them in that format. Or if you just want to estimate, or you know how much you think you owe them, or you want to estimate how much you think you owe them, you can simply give them money, just make a payment to them using one of these electronic payment options, making sure that you select the proper form you're applying it to, Form 4868, the extension, and that will, in essence, bring the extension up to date as well and give them the payment necessary at the same time. So under this option, there is no need to file a separate Form 4868. Please note, you must register for the Eftps before using. Electronic payment options are available on irs.gov/payments. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description.